Hey guys, welcome to Backstage Pass Inside Energy. I'm your host, Brittni Castilaw. I'm excited to sit down with industry professionals to pull back the curtain of what's going on in the industry, what's coming down the future of the industry, and then what are those conversations that are happening behind the scenes. Today, I'm excited to introduce Wesley Adams. He's the VP at Energy Advisors, and he's joining us today. Wesley, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role looks like today.
My name's Wesley Adams. I was born and raised in the oil field in Hobbs, New Mexico, and Midland, Texas. I went to college and grad school in Oklahoma City and then landed back in Midland and actually worked in the medical field for about 5 years. I was a
Interesting.
certified licensed athletic trainer for 20 years, and about 5 years into my career, I was sitting down with my Sunday school teacher of all people, and he had started a business selling oil and gas deals, and he needed some help. And so he invited me to come on board and taught me the business from scratch. So I literally learned the business selling deals, and that's what I've done since. So
Oh, I love that. I love that you come from a history of the oil field, which is not uncommon in our industry and space. And then I love like just the influences you've had and where you are today. Tell us more about Energy Advisors. Tell us what you do there
so
and tell us more about Energy Advisors.
Energy Advisors started as Petroleum Listing Service, PLS, back in the 80s. And Ron Wise, the owner, uh, had a passion for publishing and started industry rag sheets, essentially in every aspect of the oil and gas industry. Ron, we had various newsletters that people would subscribe to, and that was kind of how the business was built. Through that period of building that up, we used to list everyone's deals that were for sale because when this thing all started, internet wasn't really a thing. And so
Yeah.
we would publish just a list of everybody's deals, and then people would inquire, and we would point them to the seller. Well, through that, we developed an advisory business as well. And so in 2018, they sold PLS and a subscription service to Inverus and then relaunched as Energy Advisors Group. And so we just maintained the advisory part of the business and have built it out since. And here we are today, about 16 strong, and we are really a research firm that advises on deals. And so we have a solid research arm. And if you look at energyadvisors.com, you'll see a research tab. We post overviews of like M&A and specialized transactions and hot topics of the day, that sort of thing. And that's led by Brian Litsky, who's a Rice graduate, and then one of our engineers and various other team members that have built that out. And then we are oil and gas transaction advisors. So we do a little bit of everything. We've worked all over the United States. We have an office in Canada as well, and so we work internationally some, but we work all over the United States selling various kinds of deals. We've sold deals from $100,000 to several hundred million, and that's kind of the way that we work. And so we are not scared to take on new projects, and we typically have a decent amount of things that we're working on at all times. And so
Oh, that's awesome. I love that you talked about the data. If you're listening, you've never went to the Energy Advisors website, he is not lying. There is a ton of information and data on that site. It's extremely helpful and really, you guys lead the industry. And so it's really cool. Thanks for giving us that overview. So Wesley, tell us what keeps you excited after all of these years in the energy space. Like what keeps you excited to keep doing this work?
the next deal, that's really what it boils
Ooh,
down to. I I think that
it's like that adrenaline rush.
it is. I mean, it's a dopamine hit whenever you
Yeah.
close something, and so I think that's probably one of the biggest things. It's it's definitely a requires steadiness and intestinal fortitude because the deal market is constantly changing, and that is the one thing that you can always count on in this space is that nothing's going to be the same tomorrow. And so
Mm.
I enjoy change. I uh, definitely seem to enjoy the challenge of it. Um, but that's really, I wake up every day with a job to do, and that is to sell the next one and to find the next one. And so everybody that you talk to, today's seller is tomorrow's buyer, and vice versa.
Well, that's good. I know that business development mindset, it's like, get the next one. Let's get it. So
Yep,
I love that. Well,
absolutely.
tell us what you're spending time on today, like problems you're solving today that you weren't solving 5, 6 years ago.
Probably the biggest thing is um, capital backing for buyers.
Okay.
It's very challenging. The amount of capital in the industry has shrunk dramatically overall, and we're starting to see some things come back. I believe that we've lost a good portion of the institutional investors. I think they do
Mm-hmm.
still dabble in oil and gas, but not near to the degree that they used to. I saw a chart one time of dollars raised into oil and gas over like the last 20 years, and we're probably at 10% of what we as an industry raised in 2016. Um, but what we
Whoa.
are seeing is that insurance money is starting to come back to the table with the asset-backed securities phenomenon that's developed and is continuing to catch fire, and it's it's a breath of fresh air in some regards, and just seeing people come back around. I mean, real estate has been so strong. We're starting to see real estate investors come into the space and whatnot, and so it's starting to open up a little more. But that's always the challenge is, finding those groups that have already received funding, um, and that's not something we've always had that question, but not something that we have had to deal with. We dealt with in the past nearly as much as we do now.
Yeah, it's like coming to the forefront. Like, this is something we have to solve now. Interesting. So, is there anything that's changing faster than what you expected or the industry has expected that you're seeing? If it's just the capital funding, or is there anything else?
There's always change. I mean, that's one of the things
Yeah.
about this industry, and one of the reasons that it's so resilient is because we're constantly pivoting. We're constantly finding
Yeah.
oil in places where we didn't know there was oil, and we're finding more oil in places that are very oily. And that's probably as a testament to the technology and the expertise that's in the industry, that we continue to find new sources of oil and gas um, all over. And I think that
Hmm.
one of the things that's happening is that people are pivoting, as places like the Permian consolidate. We're seeing people pivot to other areas like East Texas, going back
Yeah.
and looking at the Bakken, looking at the Marcellus, and really looking hard at places like South Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. And so that that's been a big eye opener, is to see those dollars turn elsewhere, and not only look at the shale plays, but looking at where they can deploy capital elsewhere into repeatable drilling and whatnot. So,
I love that you use the term resilience. Like, what a great word to wrap up what this industry is, because the pendulum is swinging faster now with AI and all the technology. And it's like, this industry is resilient. We're going to figure it out. We're going to go and find the next thing. And I love that you use that term. That's really cool. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, Wesley. So I'm a straight shooter. I love to shoot people straight. So I have a whole segment called Let's Be Honest. So I want you to shoot us straight, shoot our listeners straight. What's something in this industry that makes you roll your eyes?
I think that one of the biggest things is that people believe that there's a right answer to a lot of things. And the reason I say that, I can work on a deal and we can have 10 bidders on the same deal and all with drastically different values. And so there's so many things that have to line up for a deal to get done that to say that there's a right answer for a person, right? There's not a right answer overall in most
Right.
cases. And I think that that's one of the things that I fight a lot is, as people look at a deal, they're like, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I'm like, well, other people may see that as value adds, not a detriment to this deal. And so that's probably one of the biggest things. And as a whole, and we don't see this in industry as much, but out of industry is the lack of understanding that people have of the requirement for cheap energy to
Yes.
fuel the world.
Yes.
And we take
It's
it for
like,
granted here. So
yeah, we just turn our light switch on and we have power and we don't think about what it takes to get that, or we use our phone, or all of the things. And
absolutely.
I think you're so right, like there's this gap of misconception or even just knowledge base of like what it takes to get that. So that's a good point. That's a good point. So what do you think's a common practice that just doesn't work anymore?
I would say valuing your property that you own based upon kicking the can down the road on liability. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we've seen dramatically shift in recent history is the focus on liability and the funding underwriters requiring liability to be incorporated into the value of an asset. There for a long time and a good portion of my career, people have looked at deals from a strictly what the cash flow is and multiples of that cash flow and considering and looking at liability, their inactive wells, that they would take care of themselves, that you could kick that can down the road, that if you need to plug it, that you could sell equipment. Well, the
Right.
salvage for equipment has dramatically dropped off. And so it's been a long time since there's been a salvage market that would plug a well. And plugging costs have gone up due to inflation in part. Um, the number of people that have left the industry to go pursue other avenues for work, it means there's less rigs available and less equipment out there. I mean, there's tons of equipment, but having competent people to run it is difficult. That's probably the biggest issue that we face is, someone that's
Mm-hmm.
been a long-term holder to come back in and try to sell because their value is based upon internal value is based upon how they bought it. And there seems to
Right.
be a fundamental shift in that. And so it's created the buy sell gap or expanded it fairly significantly in a lot of cases.
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about just some decision making signals. So you work with a bunch of decision makers in your space. Like, what do you think builds trust today?
Performance, I mean,
Okay.
100%. And I just had lunch with a friend of mine, and that's one of the things we were talking about is whenever you have to go to a capital source and say, hey, we have a great idea, we want you to fund it. If I've already done that and I'm in the process of doing it and you're asking them to invest alongside you, then
Mm-hmm.
that conversation is completely different than just throwing out an idea and saying, I want you to fund it. Because while you may have skin in the game, keeping you and your team paid, it does not, you need to be able to invest alongside a lot of capital sources. And that's really a major a major thing is if you can perform, I'm willing to give anyone a chance. You know,
Yeah.
this is a large industry when you need it to be small, and it's a small industry when you need it to be large. That's something that I tell people all the time because if you run your reputation in this space, it's very difficult to stay in it. And so because people talk and a lot
Yeah.
of people know each other. And so it's definitely something that you got to pay attention to for sure.
I love that performance action, like showing that you've done it before. That takes a lot of risk out of the decision for someone to make. It's like, okay, they've done it. They know what they're doing. They're not going to make me look bad in front of the board or in front of the executives. I trust this person. We see that a lot on our side. I'm on the marketing side, and we see that a lot when we're building campaigns. It's like, what can we show? We got some project profiles, case studies, data, technical white papers to show that performance. I love that. So if you were taking a meeting from someone you've never met in a corporate environment, what would make you take the meeting or what would make you ignore the meeting?
I take a lot of meetings
Okay.
because you never know what piece of knowledge that person has that is something you don't know, right? And so I'm very open to meeting with people, even if uh, there's not any seemingly direct business to do with them,
Mhm.
because I'm a lifelong learner. I mean, I want to learn. I want to know what you're doing that's interesting, that sort of thing. And so I think, you know, obviously my personal busyness has an impact on decision making, on when I can do things and when I can't.
Right.
Or if I feel like I'm going to be wasting your time. If you come in and perceive, and we get this a lot because of our name, Energy Advisors, or I've got a
Mhm.
private LLC called 21 Energy Resources, and people see that name and they assume that you're an oil and gas operator. And so they're coming to you with, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to, I mean, I'm always interested in meeting new people, but I mean, I try to be very respectful from the standpoint of, if I don't think that we're going to be a fit, and there's not really a reason to talk, I won't I won't take those meetings, and I'll tell them why. And many times they're like, "Oh yeah, that doesn't make sense." you know, so it's I think mutual respect, being a business in the business development and hearing no a lot. I tell people all the time, I was like, I would much rather hear a quick no, because no is an answer,
Same.
and I do not want to bother you. That is never my goal. My goal is to provide you with what you're looking.
Yeah. I love that you've talked about how you're open to meeting more than most people might be. And I feel like that is a business development like mindset. It's like, hey, like networking, having a quick chat on Teams or even, a coffee chat. Like those things matter, especially if it's not a waste of time. It can definitely like there might be a bridge or a connection to be made. So I love that. That's really
Absolutely.
cool. What are some red flags when you're evaluating partnerships or deals or anything like that? What are some red flags that you look for?
Obviously, looking for holes in deals all the time. I mean, when you see these things, you see deals, I want to believe that you have a good reason for why you're doing what you're doing. Whenever I see things where I know from my experience that it's going to be difficult, I'm going to tell you that. And so it's a lot of red flags out there right now, especially as deals are concerned. I would say probably number one is whenever I see a large well count on a deal and a
Mm,
lot of inactive wells, uh, with the Railroad Commission, New Mexico OCD, the various state agencies and federal agencies seemingly have focused more on those things. And so that is probably, whenever I'm evaluating a deal, that has become one of the first questions I ask. I do want to know what your production is. I do want to know what your cash flow is, but I also want to know your well count. And I want to know how
yeah.
many of those wells are inactive and if they have utility. Uh, and because it's getting harder to write those things off. I mean, the rules haven't changed from the standpoint of dealing with 10% of your inactive wells every year. And then in Texas, that's kind of the rule with the Railroad Commission, is that you need to be dealing with 10% of your inactive wells every year, and you constantly do that. Um, but that's probably the number one red flag that I look for. And then I look for people. Another red flag that I look for are, I would say, sources of capital that aren't really solidified. Um,
Yeah.
we're always trying to vet buyers, and I'm willing to give people a chance. And there are times where I come to a client that I'm working on the sell side for. I'm like, look, this guy's raising money, and sometimes they're willing to work with them, and sometimes they're not. And so it's the capital, the lack of capital in the industry has created a scarcity. And one of the things that I've seen a lot of are investors wanting to invest in a deal, not in a team. And so what happens is even some very experienced, well thought of teams are subjected to a scenario where they have to try to lock up a deal and then go show it to some people, different groups to see if they can get it funded. And then sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. And so it's definitely challenging in that regard. But yeah, those are some of the red flags I look for. But as long as people are
Yeah.
honest with me, and we can have those conversations, I'm not going to write someone off just because they're fundraising, because I believe that
Right.
most people are fundraising, just in general in the industry. I mean, there are, and so when you see the groups that are well funded and whatnot come to the table, many times they kind of get moved up to the top of the list, and when there's not a closing risk uh, associated with a particular group. So
Hmm. That's really good insight. I love that. So let's talk about where we think the industry's headed. So what changes over the next few years do you think will have the biggest impact? Like where do you see things going?
there's a lot of different directions you could take that conversation. Just I'll start with natural gas. I think that
Okay.
LNG plants export has not is not fully developed yet. It's not even
Right.
kind of developed yet, because the lead times on the projects are so long. But that is going to happen when that export option becomes much more developed. It's going to create a much better outlet for gas, just as a whole, because like in the Permian, the Waha market is
Right.
up and down significantly, almost on the daily. And so that's a big one. The other one I believe is the data center market. I believe that there is a chance, especially in Texas, and the way that our regulations are and whatnot, there that is going to create a secondary market that will partially, eh, or if not fully, displace um, or take the place of the manufacturing market that has gone away and has gotten exported. And so it's going to, as that market for gas grows, I think it's going to be, that's a big one, is the future
Yeah.
of gas, I think, is bright from that standpoint. If you can
Mhm.
wait, it's just nothing's fully baked yet. And the data center market
Right.
is just going crazy right now. And
It's
so
like a revolution.
it in a lot of ways it is, but
Yeah.
when you kind of look at it from a commodity standpoint, and then oil, there's just not a replacement for oil. I mean, doesn't matter what it is. And the other, caveat here is nuclear. Um, I am a all of the above type person. I'm not anti anything. I think that solar and wind are additions to the grid. I don't think that they're a solid primary source of energy. Um, nuclear is. Nuclear, once it's proliferated and developed and more widely accepted, is a direct replacement for electricity sourcing. But oil and gas provides so much more to the world that there is no replacement for. And so when you talk about just electricity, you do have those other components. And so
Mhm.
I mean, I think that oil and gas is consolidating, uh, and that there's a lot of people that have left the industry, and there's a lot of people, knowledge retiring out. And I think that we're going to see a resurgence in some regard at some point, depending upon how things go. But in the meantime, natural gas is the interim fuel until things like nuclear really come online to take some of that burden. But that also, we can't forget that there's more people every day. And in places like Texas, there's more people moving here every day. And,
That's right.
I had a guy tell me that they believe that they'll be able to service all the requests for electricity off the grid in the next 6 years, from data centers and these kind of things. I said, what are they going to do with the other 10 million people that move here? How are they going to get electricity?
Yeah.
And so that's where the natural gas is coming in. Data power generation is huge. Anything to do with turbines, engines, whatever, in ways. I mean, I've even heard of data centers currently running off of diesel generators, and that's unsustainable as a long-term solution. But it's
Yeah,
you know
definitely.
it's an interesting space. I mean, I think that there's job security, even though natural gas
Right,
prices
right.
are very day to day. They're very
Mm-hmm.
local markets. As we continue to see people continue to build out midstream companies, continue to build out ways to get gas out of places like the Delaware Basin, for example, and provide more
Right.
outlets for that. I mean, it's all going to get used. The issue that you have with gas is that you can't truck it unless you cool it, and that becomes into a whole energy loss scenario where
Right.
it's not economic most of the times. And so, yeah, as the infrastructure builds out and as we see data centers come online, it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out because the whole data center market is really active right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that a majority of the data center sites are going to be built out, but I think that there's going to be enough built out that it's going to be a solid secondary market for gas.
Yeah. And I know you and I are both in Texas, so we're
Yes,
in it,
we
and
are.
it's just, we're constantly. So I really like that perspective. I love that. And I think, like you said, it's like we better hold on. This resilience is about to shine.
Yep,
um,
absolutely.
all of us in the industry. Well, that's really cool. So, what's one thing that people shouldn't lose sight of as technology and the industry continue to evolve?
I think personal connection, um, right? Because what makes the world go around is relationships. I
Yeah.
think that that's a big one. I know that's a off energy answer, but I mean that's a number one key. But recognizing that we all have a place and we all have a part in providing, right? So as an oil and gas guy, I can't have this completely negative view of other sources of power and that sort of thing. And just realizing that, you know, people are people. We're all trying to make it. And I think that we don't ever want to lose sight of the fact that cheap energy is what makes the world go round. And it's what allows us to terraform the planet. And it's going to take all of the above. And I think that we can't forget that it may not be the industry you work in, but it doesn't mean that industry is unnecessary. And so it's going to be interesting as we continue to move forward and as we see things evolve. I think that we've got to remember that you know maintaining relationships across industries and being able to help each other out because we're all in this together in some regards
Right.
is definitely something that people can't forget. So
That's so good. And, this industry is built on relationships. You and I know that. And so it's like the companies that keep that at the forefront, even with the technology changes, even with the pendulum swings, like those are the ones that are going to have that competitive advantage. And not only just within their niche or in their specific sector, but like you said, like across all sectors and even into, the consumer market and that side of it. So I love that. That's a good perspective, Wesley. Well, I really, really enjoyed visiting with you today. Is there anything, if there's one thing that people could remember from today's conversation, like what would you leave behind, Wesley?
Number one, that oil and gas is not evil. Um, I would say, be a respecter of different opinions and people. I would say that's probably the number one thing to remember is that there's always something to learn. And in this fast changing environment, that's what keeps things moving. And that's why we are so resilient, because we never stop learning. And so, I mean, to answer your question more concisely, never stop learning. I mean,
I love that.
always look around you and see what the benefits are and the negatives are of things. Think critically and really,
Yeah.
don't write things off just because they're different from what you think they ought to be. So,
I love that. Take the meeting. Take the
yeah,
meeting,
take
right?
the
Learn
meeting,
something.
talk to people.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
it's
Well,
great.
that's awesome, Wesley. Well, thank you so much. And to our viewers, if you want to keep the conversation going, Wesley is on LinkedIn. You can look him up, send him a message there. And thanks so much for tuning in today.